Hi guys, welcome back to the next part of the series. Now we're going to jump on to the next section, which is the pommel. So let's start with this basic shape right here. So remember Alt and Q to jump to this one right there. And now we're in sculpt mode. Now, one of the first things I'm going to do is I'm of course going to remesh. So I'm going to press R to make sure that we have a nice resolution. Let's start with something slightly big, something like 0.008. And we're going to press Control R. There we go. Now, all of these polygons are still here. Even though they're not active, they're still here. So one of the things that you can do is you can, let's again go to Alt-Q to this guy right here. There we go. And we can turn it off. That way we're not going to be distracted by it right now. And it should save a little bit of resources from Blender as well. Later on, I'll explain how we can like minimize the amount of polygons as well. But yeah, let's go with this one. Now, let's go to Pure Ref. There we go. I always like to have my Pure Rev right here. And as you can see, we have a very like jaggedy edge on this shape right here. So I'm going to go with my scrape brush. In this particular asset, I actually want to keep it asymmetrical. So one of the things that you're going to have to decide whenever we're working on a project is which parts should be asymmetrical and which parts should be symmetrical. And it will all depend on the like type of thing that you're doing. But in this particular case, since we already are going to have a very symmetrical like handle and lava handle, having a couple of things that are not symmetrical can break up the symmetry of the things, and it's going to make it a lot easier for people to feel invested in our elements. So I'm gonna start right here. As you can see, I can see this like little point right there. And as we've mentioned previously, having 90-degree angles is not always a good idea for bakes. So adding this sort of like bevel everywhere is a good idea. I think I'm gonna increase the resolution a little bit more. Let's go for 0.3. Control R. This is a smaller object, so we might need a little bit more geometry because of its size. Very, very common as well. There we go. On this one, for instance, I feel like making a big chip. So a big yeah, just like a big damage point right there. Now, keep in mind that every time we change the silhouette or every time we make things slightly more interesting, that also means extra time that we're going to have to spend, for instance, on the retopology process. We're going to talk about retopology, I believe, in chapter 6 or something like that, based on my plan. But we're going to be doing this. And again, the more like complex the shapes become, the more complex the retopology can become as well. Oh, my God. Oh, God. Sorry. There we go. Now, another thing that I want to do to give this a little bit more, life are those like big dents that we have right there. So I'm going to use my clay or draw shape, sorry. And we're going to start adding some of them. Let's make the brush a lot smaller. And there we go. Now on the very border, I'm going to do Control to do the opposite direction. And that's going to give me a sharper effect, as you guys know. And then that part right there, again, with the scrape brush, we can flatten it out to recover the effect. Some of you might be wondering, well, shouldn't we like increase the resolution a little bit more so that we get more, like details? And the answer is, again, it's a small piece. Like compared to the rest of the elements, it's gonna occupy a really like a relatively small amount of surface area. So even if I were to give this like even a little bit more, like say 0.2, right, to get like more resolution, we're not. It might be that we might not even be able to bake this down into a texture later on, because the space that this thing is going to have on the UV map is going to be really, really, really small. So that's the first one on the... Oh, okay, that one's like actually did this one. So that one's a little bit more strong. So I'm going to go to clay strips. And let's remove a bigger chunk right there. As you can see, now we're getting a little bit of a slow response. And this could be due to the cylinder, because again, even though it's hidden, like Blender knows that it's here somewhere. Let's go over here. Go. There we go. There we go. And just again clay. What's the word? Clay strips. And a little bit of scrape to flatten this out. Another thing I like to do, for instance, you can see that there's I don't know, like the shadow here, it kind of tells me that there's a little bit more volume than what I have right here. So it might not be a bad idea to add a little bit of volume on the top part right here. I'm not sure if I having, like it feels like I might have activated something here. It's giving me a little bit of a performance issue. I'm gonna bring this thing down a little bit. Let's see if that helps. Yeah, it definitely helps a little bit. So I'm gonna add a little bit of clay strips all around this part right here. And then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use my scrape brush to just like give it the sort of like hammered, like hammered metal effect. This is a technique that I like to use quite a bit, especially for surfaces that are very flat. I never want to have, or I never like having like perfectly flat surfaces. I always like to add a little bit more of texture every now and then. So there we go. Brush. Sorry, I was I was thinking about the shortcuts instead of ZBrush. There we go. Scrape brush, and we're gonna flatten all of these things. I've been like using so many softwares throughout my career, so I get some of them mixed every now and then. I apologize for that. By the way, talking about softwares, I'm not like married to any software. I like all of them for specific things. So, and that's what I suggest to everyone that's getting into the industry. Don't think that one software is just like the best and there's no other software that's gonna match it. All of them are really good. So let's go draw sharp, smaller brush, a little bit smaller. Let's do a big like element right there. Let's do another one right here. We're not seeing this. These are not in the concept. But again, it makes sense to have, you know, something on this other side, right? There we go. Let's go again with our scrape brush to flatten that element, especially to kind of like blend that in, so it really looks like a dent and not just like a drawn piece. And there you go. As you can see, we get a very nice result. And it starts looking like everything starts looking like this very high quality effect. I'm gonna press Alt Q and I'm gonna go to this one now, to the cylinder. Let's go very quickly to layout mode. And this one I'm just gonna do Control A, apply all transforms, because I think that might be what this one's missing. No, that one's fine. So just to make sure that it's on the like that. Let's do R to get let's start with a high amount of resolution. Control R. There we go. And in this one, I am going to turn on symmetry because I do want to like soften this up. And you can see here on the reference that this one has a little bit of like an eye shape. I don't know. So it's a little bit weird. So I'm going to use my grab brush. And I'm going to use the grab brush to kind of like shape this thing a little bit closer to what we have on the concept. So on both sides, let's shape this a little bit more like this. And I can also see that like going towards the top here, especially the center area is raised a little bit. So I'm gonna raise the volume there. And in just a second, we're gonna start like playing around with our scrape brush to give this sort of like hard surfacey look. This is why it's very important to work again on the primary forms. Like the process that I show you with the handle at first, that's a process that we're going to be doing on every single piece. Primary forms, secondary forms, tertiary forms. Let's give this a little bit more resolution. There we go. And now I'm going to go with my scrape brush. Let's make the brush a little bit smaller. And we're going to start giving it the sharp effect that we have here on the border. Definitely are going to need a little bit more geometry. This is already looking quite nice. Yeah, it's looking very nice. For this one right here, I'm going to show you another trick. I'm going to use clay strips again. And I'm going to start adding... Okay, we definitely need a little bit more. There we go. We're going to start adding a little bit, kind of like a little heel. And we start like fading it out a little bit. And now when we use our scrape brush, that's gonna allow us to capture that sort of like intense effect right there. Then grab brush, for instance, and we can just start correcting this a little bit there. I'm gonna push this down a little bit because I don't wanna be like pushing this too high into the other piece, into this one that we just finished. Actually, we might want to go to layout And just like bring this down a little bit. There we go. Let's go back to sculpting. And let's like sharpen this a little bit more there. Same thing on this back side. This is the back side, so we're gonna grab our clay strips. I'm gonna be adding this right here, like a little bit of a hill. Blend it a little bit, and then with scrape brush, we start flattening this to get a nice sharp line right there. The point, as you can see, it's a little bit sharper, so I'm going to try to sharpen this up. And I would expect to have a similar sort of like hard surfacey effect here on the bottom part. So again, using my scrape brush, let's make the size a little bit bigger. We can kind of like tweak all of this information. And I'm not sure if you see it, but it's kind of giving it this sort of like hammer metal look, right? So same thing here on the front. We can start pushing this to generate a nice little line right there. And just blend this back and hit the different areas. There we go. Good. It's a little bit smaller. You can play a little bit more with the texture right there. And over here, like if we go to this sort of like side view, you can press, by the way, Alt when you're rotating, and it's going to bring you to your orthographic views. We've been doing pretty much everything in perspective, but I just want to like mention that in case you guys want to use that tool. There we go. Yeah, that looks good. One more thing I think it's worth it for this one is to go to my scrape brush again. And when you have multiple objects, the other objects, they act kind of like masks. So I should be able to like use this tool very close to the other piece, to this one, so that we can start seeing the overlap there a little bit better, because I don't want to have an ugly overlap. So as you can see, this thing is kind of like pressed against this other one, so it might be a good idea to use our clay strips again, just like carve in a little bit there to indicate that there's a specific sort of a connection point there for the two elements, right? That's also a great place to kind of like add a little bit of like rust and grime. So I'm gonna add a little bit of damage there, or this could be another way to blend it. Like we can just add a little bit of like a welding point or something. And as you can see, this gives us a very, very nice result as well. There we go. We start seeing the general result, and it's really damn good. Let's go for some heavy. Since we have a symmetrical, this is symmetrical, this is asymmetrical. Now let's make this one a little bit more symmetrical. So I am gonna just add the little cut here. Go. Let's go with the draw sharp to make this more into a triangular looking shape, kind of like in the concept. I'm gonna really go in there at the center. Let's do Control R, and we could even go with our scrape brush and just polish some of those sides. Let's go again with the draw sharp. Control R again. Control R. That should be more than enough. I'm going to use draw sharp with weak control to kind of like sharpen this border a little bit more. Then again, with our scrape brush, we can flatten this to give it a more hard surfacey look. We see it from the far, we're gonna see a very big like nick right there. Let's go back to our clay strips. Smaller brush size. Just add a little bit of damage there. Let's go draw sharp. We're going to be able to get even more like detail with the textures as well. But if you, for instance, are planning on 3D printing something or generating a very high poly mesh for other like reasons, it is important that you try to add as much detail at this stage as possible. So for instance, I could go with some very like interesting lines right here, just like scratches, you know, something that you would expect to see after using this thing for a long time. Finally, this little piece right here. So let's do Alt Q to this one. I do like, it's a simple piece, right? And it might not seem like we really need to give it any sort of like a texture or anything. But as you can see, we're already getting a very like nice sculpted effect everywhere else. And if we just keep it like this, it looks very low poly. So even a low poly thing like this, I do believe we should give it some elements. So I'm gonna Control R right there. Let's definitely go a little bit heavier. There we go. And now, pretty much the only thing I want to do is I want to use my clay strips to, let's turn on symmetry. It's a simple piece, so symmetry is fine. So I just want to give it a little bit of texture. Again, similar to what we did on other parts. So we'll just give here a little bit of texture to the piece. And then with trim dynamic, trim dynamic again. Sorry, my confusion. With scrape brush, we're just gonna flatten all of this. There we go. I'm gonna try to keep the borders very nicely there. We can definitely like bevel them just a tad bit in a couple of places. And that's definitely gonna help sell the sort of like stylized, again, hammered, battle-worn effect. Let's use a little bit of clay strips again. There we go. Smooth. And as you can see, that's looking way, way better. I believe that thing that we have right there, I think that's a mask. So I'm gonna go all the way down here to my masks and just paint it out with Control and just paint the mask out. There we go. Cool. So now, as you can see, the lower part of the handle, all of these elements of my axe are very much ready. I'm gonna go all the way to the top and just use my clay strips again. Give it a little bit more texture to all of this area. Again, I usually don't like leaving any area like completely flat. I always like to give it a little bit of texture. I've mentioned before, this can be done in texturing, but if I wanted to print this, 3D print this, it's always good to have the detail like actually baked in. It makes for a more compelling effect as well. So I do recommend spending the time to really give your weapon as much detail as you can. Again, take your time, don't rush it. If you feel like you are still struggling with the tools or with the elements, don't worry. Take your time and just keep doing it until you get a good result. I'm gonna go to the layout here, and I am gonna push it a little bit lower because I feel like it was already touching the other element too much, and this makes a little bit more sense. So yeah, that's it, my friends. I'm gonna stop the video right here, and in the next one we are gonna be going over to this guy's right here, which is the last part of our handle. Pretty much is the last part of the handle that we need to deal with. And after that, we are going to be going into, well, the next chapter, which is going to be the hammer. So hang on tight, and I'll see you back on the next one.